Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Blizzard Watch podcast. I'm Matt. I'm the host. With me this week are EIC Liz and Joe. He's not also the EIC. That was really bad structuring there, but you know who Joe is. I'm going to move right into this because I thought it was really interesting, and Liz came back with some really cool stuff. So the Sepulcher of the First Ones is he just had its Mythic drop this week. I believe it today as we're recording this.
This morning.
And Liz, you were telling us that no one's run Mythic yet? Of the World First Guilds?
No one is running Mythic. It's Mythic launch day, and no one is running Mythic. No one! This just astounds me. Everyone is running Heroic. Everyone is doing Heroic splits. They're trying to click tier gear before they go into Mythic. I mean, they've been running Heroic splits all day. No one has gotten the first boss of Sepulcher down yet. I don't know that any of the big guilds have even tried. It is so wild. This is different than any other world first race. Is this
the first world first race we've had since, say, Warlords, where they've had tier sets?
Yeah,
I think it
is.
Yeah, and it's the first world first that we've that's been during this age where they're streaming everything that has had tier sets, and they are all working so hard to get their tier sets. And I just think this really speaks to the power of these tier sets.
Well, not only
another like really interesting thing is no one has killed the jailer yet. No one has killed Heroic Jailer. And one of the reasons I've seen being tossed around for why, maybe we haven't done that yet is that the jailer does not drop any tier pieces, so people don't care enough to go into it. Or, maybe they just don't want to get into their jailer strategies yet, but it's just no one has bothered. They've been running Heroic splits.
And he's also not required to move on to Mythic, so there's no reason to really down him. But yeah, the tier sets in particular, like we were talking about this in work chat a couple weeks ago, late night with Corey, and they fundamentally change the playstyle of so many of the classes, like in your particular roles inside of those classes, that like I'm not surprised that they're being sought after so hard. I am surprised that they're not doing Heroic splits and then still pushing into Mythic even a little bit to try to give themselves time.
Mm-hmm. They've been doing a lot of Heroic splits. So
basically people are not just are they doing Heroic splits, but then they're going and getting other characters and doing Heroic splits on them too?
Yeah, I think so. They're trying to gear people out. And it's like the people who aren't getting tier sets are probably not going to be characters that are going into Mythic. They need that power level.
Interesting. That is unusual because, I mean, we definitely haven't seen that in previous World First this expansion. I mean, that's not the case at all for Sanctum or for... I can't never remember Denathrius' raid's name, the first one that we did. You guys know what I'm talking about. I can't.
Castle Nathria. I was waiting for you. Yeah,
thank you. But I mean, that is interesting. That is not something we've seen before. So, yeah. What do you guys think? Do you think they're going to do it tomorrow, or do you think they're going to? I got to know from Liz.
They're definitely gonna give it a go tomorrow. I mean, eventually they're gonna run out of the number of Heroic splits they can reasonably do, and they're gonna have to start giving Mythic a try.
Yeah. Do you think they might actually go back to normal to get tier, to just fill tier out, or?
No, I think that's probably just too low eye level, but I don't know. Maybe.
I mean, I'm just wondering if the tier sets are that good, and you got a guy who just needs one piece to get it. If you do that,
maybe. Like one of my big example, I play a paladin, so my big example is paladins. Avenging Wrath in 9.2, they nerfed the heck out of it. They removed an entire spell rank of it. So now it buffs crit damage and healing by 20%. It used to be 30%. So that's not insignificant. It's kind of these Avenging Wrath windows that paladins of all specs use to have like a big burst. And that's been cut back pretty significantly. And I personally, my opinion is that part of this is because our tier 4 set bonus, our 4-piece set bonus, will extend the duration of Avenging Wrath. And a lot of people were early on saying, oh, that's way too powerful. That's so powerful. And it's like, well, maybe it was so powerful that they had to cut our baseline powers, so it wasn't too powerful. So I'm kind of feeling right now that to get back to the power I had in 9.1, 9.15, I need to go out and collect my 4-piece to just get back to my starting place.
That's interesting that you say that. I've heard other people say that about their classes, but I don't know. Like I'm curious if it is the reality or if it's the perception of how good the set bonuses are that they would nerf it in order to compensate. Do you know what I mean?
The other thing is they've been nerfing paladins like every patch. Certainly holy paladins. I usually play holy because they think we do too much damage.
Mm-hmm.
But like the Avenging Wrath thing, that's an across the board nerf, and the extending the time of Avenging Wrath is, that's an across the board buff if you get that 4-piece set.
Yeah, and I think 4-piece set
I don't know.
4-piece set for Shaman, at least on the restoration side, I know is really important, but I also know that I don't know how to say this without sounding like I think I'm the greatest healer ever, so I apologize, but like I'm still able to keep up with people that have 20 eye levels on me. So like I don't know if that's, a function of me being just a good healer and able to compensate, or if I'm not actually nerfed or whatever the case is, right? But I've heard other like Restoration Shaman complain that they feel weaker, and I'm just like, I don't get it. So I don't know. It's an interesting place to be in.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at the warrior set bonuses, and I am not likely to get this set, this tier. I think I'm out of raiding until the next expansion, quite frankly, because I took too much time away. But I'm looking at the set bonuses for warriors, and the prot bonus.
Prot's stupid good right now.
My God, just the 2-piece. Consuming 30 rage grants you a stack of Seeing Red, which transforms at 8 stacks into Outburst, causing your next Shield Slam or Thunderclap to be 200% more effective, and grants Ignore Pain. So you'll just get Ignore Pain after you hit a guy in the face with your shield twice as hard as you normally do. That's crazy. That is an amazing set bonus. And that's the 2-piece.
Mm-hmm.
The 4-piece for prot, I mean, I don't even know how to talk about this. It's just, wow. The 4-piece for prot, Avatar increases your damage dealt by an additional 10% and decreases damage taken by 10%. Avatar instantly grants Outburst. So you hit Avatar, it buffs your damage by 10%, it nerfs damage taken by 10%, and it instantly grants you the Outburst ability from Seeing Red, which means that your next Shield Slam is going to immediately put Ignore Pain on you, and it's going to get an extra 10% buff on top of the 200% buff it already had. Like, what? That's crazy. That is so good. I can see why you'd want to get, if you had a warrior tank in your guild, and I don't know how many people do, but if I had a warrior tank, I would definitely want to get him 4-piece because that'll make him a lot easier to deal.
We do, and that's one of the things that we're targeting for. But and they just had their damage increase too. I think prot damage was increased like 27% or something like that. Yeah,
I already knew about that. But yeah, this is an amazing. I'm not so sure how good the arms set is. Although Colossus Smash lasts 3% longer and increases your damage dealt by an additional 5%. I mean, that's nice, but it's certainly not that thing I just said about prot. I mean, 200%, wham! Ow, my face. It's just cheese. But yeah, I can see definitely why you definitely might want to farm up that tier set. Although I am surprised they didn't go in today. I mean, even just to get some wiping in, if nothing else. But
just get that first boss down. But no, collecting tier.
But anyway, that's cool. That's all. Oh, also, I want to mention that LFR, in addition to Mythic, LFR Wing 1 opened, and LFR Wing 2 is coming in 2 weeks.
Yep, and the first wing is 4 bosses.
Yeah. Also, even LFR, by the way, the end last 3 bosses, the item level is higher than the first 8. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'm going to skip away from World of Warcraft for a moment, although we certainly will be coming back to it because we have more news. But I want to talk about patch 2.7.3 for Diablo 3 on the PTR, because I didn't find out about it till today. I was actually like,
it was only announced yesterday, so it's not, you weren't real behind.
But one of the things I find really interesting is they've introduced the Echoing Nightmare, which is the first time they've added a new system, a new activity to the season. Previous seasons have all been like new mechanics, changing up the way you play. This isn't going to do that. This is going to change up what you do when you play, because the Echoing Nightmare is essentially the way it looks based on the patch notes. It's not being tested until the March 10th, and I'm going to be having needles stuck in my eye on March 10th, so I'm not sure I'm going to be on the PTR. But based on what I've from reading the patch notes, it's essentially like the way Greater Rifts are to normal Nephilim Rifts is how this Echoing Nightmare is to Greater Rifts. It's essentially a super rift. You go into Greater Rifts, you get this petrified scream from the End Guardian boss, and you use that to unlock. You take it to Kanai's Cube and use that to unlock a portal to the Echoing Nightmare. You go into the Echoing Nightmare, and the way it's phrased, you keep going until you die. Like, that seems to be what they're saying this is. It's something about you keep clearing it until you are overwhelmed. So, I mean, you read what it said. Does that sound right to you, Liz?
That's how I read it, definitely. It sounds real interesting.
Yeah. In addition to that, and they talk about like you get the various things you get from it. It's very similar. If you've run Rifts, it's the same kind of loot system. Although you will also get a special drop that augments the ancient legendaries that you get. It's a specific drop, which, I mean, if you're getting ancient legendaries from doing the Echoing Nightmare and then you're upgrading them with the drop from the Echoing Nightmare, that would make you able to go further into the Echoing Nightmare. So it might be a mechanic for allowing you to progress more in them. But it is really, at this point, it's very hard to know how that's going to play out because we haven't seen it at all. But it's inspired by a line from Orek, going back to when they first came up with Rifts and put them in the game. The character Orek, who is a Nephilim ghost, said that, you stand where other Nephilim once stood. Can you succeed where they failed? And this whole thing, the Echoing Nightmare, is the dreams of the ghosts of Nephilim past who failed. This is what happens to you if you don't succeed. You turn into one of these things, and then you try and kill people who come in. It's an interesting idea. It ties into the lore of Diablo 3 and the Nephilim. That's cool. I am waiting to see how this plays out. And I don't know if either of you sound interested in doing it, if at all. I mean, I'm pretty interested in doing it, but Joe, I don't think you play Diablo 3 that much.
I've actually kind of stopped since Diablo 2 came out. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. Like, I think I have it installed and everything, but I literally have not touched Diablo 3 since Diablo 2, the new version, came out.
Yeah. Whereas for me, Diablo 2, I played it, thought it was really nice, and it made me definitely want to play more Diablo 3. Yeah, I definitely prefer Diablo 3 to this. So, but yeah, it is interesting. The other thing they did was they've added in a bunch of changes to Greater Rifts. And Liz and I talked about it briefly. I think you said something like you didn't really understand what they'd done.
Yeah, I didn't quite get what they were aiming for, really.
Yeah. We were talking about this last night. Yeah.
Basically, from what I read,
the spaghetti comment.
Yeah, the less spaghetti and more chickens. That doesn't mean anything, Blizzard. That's like, you really kind of should have clarified what that meant. But anyway, besides that, although I did put that in there as a tagline, and I noticed you took it out of the headline. And I don't blame you. I don't blame you because it's incoherent.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
For people listening to this at home, we should explain there was a dev note under the patch note changes for it, and like the last line was the dev note was that they wanted to do less spaghetti, more chicken. And it's just, I stared at that for such a long time, and I don't know.
It's kind of like if you get fettuccine Alfredo. Seriously, that's what I was thinking when I read it. Like, it's like when you get fettuccine Alfredo and there's chicken in it, you want to put more chicken in it. Okay, I get you. I know where you're going with this.
Maybe.
But maybe. It is a weird statement. But when I read through what they've actually done is they've buffed the amount of XP you get for specific bosses and mobs. They've changed around the maps. They've gotten rid of 2 maps that in my opinion, were the worst maps ever for Nephilim Rifts. They're getting rid of the Hidden Aqueduct and Chaldeum Sewers maps. And they don't say why they're doing it, but my opinion is they're getting rid of those because of the way those maps work. there are so many ways you could be clearing them, and you're following the mobs, and you go down a direction, and suddenly you're stuck in a cul-de-sac, and you have to run the entire length of the map back to find the other mobs and kill them. And I've actually had rifts where there was like a guy left, and I couldn't find him to kill him. And that's not good for rifts. The whole point of a rift is that the mobs come to you and you murder them. That's it. Having a map where you have to hunt and peck trying to find that one guy to get the Rift Guardian to spawn is not a good thing. And it can even be hard to find the way out of those levels. Mm-hmm. So overall, not a fan of them. I'm glad they're gone. I don't know if adding the 3 new ones is going to work out. They're all... The one that really comes to mind is the Chaldean Sand one, because that one is a very big, open, broad one. And there's not a lot of nooks and crannies to it. So I think that one will be better, but the other 2 I'm on the fence about. But the buffs to the various monsters, that's just great. Cool. Make this happen faster. The goal seems to be to make Greater Rifts go faster, to make it so you can get them done quicker and run more of them if you want to. And I think it's not a surprise that they did this while they're introducing the Echoing Nightmare. Because people are going to need to run Greater Rifts to get the drop to do the Echoing Nightmare. So you want the Greater Rifts to go faster so more people can run the Echoing Nightmare, since that is the whole deal of your season. You know, that's what I took from it, looking at it. This is very much, we're speeding up Greater Rifts so you can get your Petrified Scream so you can run the Echoing Nightmare. Because it is very much a system that is on the top. So you need to make everything faster to let people... Because if you think about it, you're going to have to run normal rifts to get the keystones, to run greater rifts, to get the Petrified Scream, to run Echoing Nightmares. And so that's why I think that they worked on greater rifts. But that's just my opinion. I don't have any... There's nothing in the dev notes that says this is why we did this. They just said they're trying to make it faster and more fun, for less spaghetti, more chickens.
Yeah,
I guess, idea. Yeah, in this scenario, I suppose monsters are the chickens.
Chickens.
Yes.
But, I haven't had dinner yet, so...
No, none of us have eaten yet.
Loot chickens. Yes, let's go for it.
Anyway, to move on to another thing. This one is a Hearthstone one, but it's pretty interesting because next week, I think the 15th, we're getting the new Hearthstone expansion announcement. I don't know what it is, obviously. Either you want to guess? Liz, you want to guess?
Nah, I don't play the guessing game. I'd rather know than guess.
Yeah, but we have to wait till next week for that.
Yeah. It's just, there's going to be a new Hearthstone expansion. There's going to be new cards. We're probably going to find out what's going to be in the core set next, which is kind of interesting. Because Hearthstone now has a core set of cards that everyone has access to. You don't have to buy cards. You don't have to do anything. Everyone has access to this basic set of cards. And that can rotate. So we haven't seen a rotation since they introduced the core set. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do there. But as to another expansion, Hearthstone releases expansions like clockwork. They are really consistent, about 3 expansions a year. They release them on a really consistent schedule. So honestly, I'm kind of over it. It's very formulaic, and that's not bad. You know what to expect, but it's not. A Hearthstone expansion isn't as exciting as a Warcraft expansion or anything.
Well, that leads us into the next thing. We also know when we're getting our next World of Warcraft expansion announcement, because that's on April 19th. Now I'm going to say, you guys want to guess on this one?
I've been talking with my guild about, what do we want to do next? And I want to go to Elwyn Forest, and I want to start my own pumpkin farm. That's it. I just want to ignore all of this big, terrible stuff going on in the world. I want to put down my sword and not deal with any of this crap, and I'm going to grow pumpkins. That's my plan. I kind of doubt Blizzard has that same plan, but this is what I'm going for.
World of Warcraft pumpkins.
Listen, Matt and I have determined that that's how we solve the faction divide. It's pigs and pumpkins.
Honestly, we know that they're putting in patch 9.2.5 the ability to play with friends of opposite factions, which is when I'll start begging you guys for carries through the raid, because I would like some gear. But I'm not kidding. That wasn't a joke. Don't laugh.
No, I'm here for it.
But also, I don't know if they're going to be putting in a lore reason for this. They haven't said anything about whether or not there's going to be any kind of story to the patch that explains why we're suddenly like, hey, you know what? That part where you burned down the tree my family lived on, I'm cool with that. Yeah, you know, I didn't actually do that, but yeah, I understand why you'd be mad. Could you? And I'm glad you stopped trying to stab me. That's really important. Yeah, the stabbing thing, I guess it did get in the way of us talking. Yeah, because mostly all I was saying was stop trying to stab me. Yeah, I know. I don't know if they're putting that in. I think they should. That would be, but I also don't know how important that's going to be in the next expansion. And I've wondered about this. Like, if the next expansion was actually literally, we're all friends now, I would be okay with that. I just want this. I want us to just be friends. Let's just be friends.
I don't even think it's. I think they're already laying the groundwork for it now, though. Like, start looking at the interactions again between Jaina and Thrall and everybody else for the last 2-3 major patches. Every time there's been a major story beat release, it's about moving away from beating each other up and further towards working together, even when they don't want to. Like, even Jaina working with Sylvanas was a thing because Uther's like, you don't have to trust her, you have to trust me. And do you trust me? And if the answer is yes, I got you. And so you're starting to get to this point where they can now start having this conversation of, I don't have to be your best friend. We don't have to be going out for sushi every Tuesday together, but I don't need to stab you either. And so
God, wouldn't that be great if that was just a quest?
Go eat sushi every Tuesday. Yeah, 100%. Blizzard, you're welcome. That one's free. But like I think it's leaning towards that, where it's more about coexistence, not necessarily best friendship. And we're getting to that point where they don't need to add anything additional because it's kind of already there.
I just think that it would be nice if there was like a little bit of storyline leading into that. For that matter, I want them to do something that in the past they've done it and it's been really difficult to deal with. Sometimes, like the end of Battle for Azeroth didn't really have any major, all it had was go to Northrend, kill a bunch of stuff. Like, remember all these Wrath of the Lich King guys? They're back. Kill them again. But it's still set up where we were going. I want them to have a setup where we are going bit. I want them to have something along those lines, preferably with a really large bag, so everybody can get really upset when the bag doesn't drop for them. Because man, people were so mad.
Good times, right?
Yeah. Well, I was just there to kill the guy. I didn't even know he had a bag. And then he wouldn't drop the bag, and people would get so upset. I'm like, I'm sorry, I did not take the bag. I am not responsible for baglessness. I did not tell him not to drop his bag. May I suggest kill him again, I guess? I'm not really. I'm just here to try and get some gear before the next expansion. But yeah, I definitely want that. I should also mention the WoW mobile game is also going to be announced.
Yeah.
That's happening in May. They're announcing it. I got nothing on that. I have no idea. I think it will obviously be tied into the new expansion because they're announcing it a month after. Yeah. But I could be wrong. It could be something completely different. I don't know. We've talked forever about it being a pet battle game, and at this point, I think it's not going to be a pet battle game just because that's what everybody wants. And, that's just how things work in my world. So, but I mean, I'm not asking you guys to speculate on what it's going to be, but I am going to ask you this. What impact do you think this is going to have? Do you think this is going to be a big deal, or do you think it's just going to be like a footnote, or what? Like, how do you feel about WoW doing a mobile game?
I think what I'm worried about is that it's going to have just this immensely negative community reaction. Because you get this thing where real gamers, serious gamers don't play mobile games. You kind of still have that stigma against mobile games. But mobile games can be really fun. Some games work really well on mobile. I love playing games on my iPad because you have this touch interface, which is totally different. Not every game would work on an iPad, but some games work really well on a tablet. And that's just a nice way to play. You don't have to sit at your computer. You just have a tablet in your lap and you tap on the screen and stuff happens. It's pretty good. And so whatever the game is, whatever it's like, I'm worried that no one's going to give it a chance.
Yeah, I definitely think that, it's taken them 2 years of continuous work to get people to back off on the whole
Immortal.
Diablo Immortal thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're definitely not. I don't think you're exaggerating at all. I definitely think you're on
And
something.
I still hear those jokes like, haha, don't you have a phone, that everyone rags on the Immortal team about. So yeah, I'm mostly concerned that it's just going to get such a horrible negative community reaction and people are going to be really terrible to the developers, and it might be a really fun game, but no one's going to give it a chance. So, and it may not be a fun game. I have no idea what it is.
Yeah.
But you got to know what it is. You got to give it a chance before you find out whether it's fun or not, before you can offer any valid criticism or valid praise. So, yeah, I'm just worried no one's going to give it a chance. And mobile games are games. There are mobile games out there that are spectacular.
I think at this point, people have to get over that mindset that mobile games aren't games.
Agreed.
For one thing, just in terms of sheer profit, companies are going to make more of these. They make money. It's going to happen. All you're doing is looking like a Luddite. Like, that's not real games. Real games are on a computer. It's like you said that same stuff when console gaming started. It's just no. It's not worth your time. It's not worth our time. You were going to say something, Joe, so I'm shutting up.
I forgot what I was going to say, so keep going.
Sorry. I think I'm pretty much done on that.
I do remember. And for everybody that wants to argue about like, mobile gaming is not real gaming, I just want to ask how many of them own a Switch. A console that is blowing the other ones out of the water in terms of sales and households that it's in, that is conceived not just as a home console, but also a mobile console. So mobile gaming is important to people. It is a thing that exists and people need to get over it. So.
Okay, I think that's pretty much it for news. Unless, Liz, you had a whole bunch of events. I didn't use all of them.
No, we don't have to.
Okay.
No, I think those were the highlight.
Oh, I will say also, though, Diablo 2 Resurrected is on the PTR right now with its ladder system. It's being tested right now. So if you want to see that or help them test it, it would be a really good idea to get on there and play some ladder play in Diablo 2. If you don't know what ladder play is, it's very similar to a Diablo 3 season. There are some differences, but it's basically the same idea. It's seasonal play. You start off at level 1 and you go until you're max level. So that's something that Liz had put in the her schedule thing, and I forgot. So I'm going to mention it now. But now I think we're going to move on to doing some questions. As is usually the case, if you've got an email for the show, please send it to podcast@blizzardwatch.com with the subject line podcast or Blizzard Watch, so we know it's for this show. Or if you don't like emails, a lot of people don't. I'm old enough that to me emails are still fancy and new, but to a lot of people emails are annoying. You can go to our Discord server and you can go to the Patron Q and Podcast Questions channel if you're a patron, and we look there first for questions because you guys are supporting the site and we want to do something nice for you in return. But if you can't support the site through Patreon, we understand, and we do have a Q and Podcast Questions channel. Renamed so by Liz because we were calling it we were taking questions from the Q Questions channel and that felt like we were being jerks. Now it's all named up proper and you can put your question there as well. And I did in fact take at least 2 questions from there. So yeah, this first question I'm going to have Joe read it because I know Joe has things to say about this. So.
Okay. This is from 6K. Question for the podcast. People, I don't know how to feel about Arthas anymore. This stems from the latest cinematic at the end of the Anduin fight. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop before I keep reading that. If we're going to be talking about this, there will be some mild spoilers. You'll probably want to give us about 5, maybe 10 minutes before you come back if you care about this. I apologize. I just want to make sure I do my due diligence. So there you go. You've gotten a little bit of a spoiler warning. All right. But with the revelation of domination magic and watching Anduin go evil, is Arthas still responsible for his actions? I mean, it was domination magic like Anduin or a fragmented soul like Sylvanas. Wasn't he just as much a victim of the jailer as the rest of them? I mean, he came out of the broken Anduin bonds at the end of the cinematic, which was supposed to identify him as some form of responsible for Anduin's subversion. But wasn't the jailer just using him too in that regard, or is Arthas the source of domination magic? I need an adult. I'm not an adult, but hopefully I can be a reasonable facsimile for you. So here's the thing about the jailer and about domination magic in general. Notice that Sylvanas isn't still dominated, right? All the souls that are in his employ have been broken down. They've been beaten, they've been ground up, they've been sliced into pieces and spliced back together. They had to be broken in order to be utilized by him. I don't think there is actually any domination magic more than anything else. It's more so of giving somebody enough space to that they make the decision you want them to make, believing that they are making the proper decision. And then you start getting into the sunk cost fallacy. So I made this choice. It led me to this place. The next logical step is here because I've already gone so far. And then you repeat that process over and over again until that person is broken and no longer able to see where they started. That's why when Sylvanas got her part of her shredded soul back, there was such a disconnect between the two. Her shard of soul that didn't get to see all the decisions she was making, that's the point of that cinematic. It was reconciling the fact that, yes, this is me. I made these choices. This isn't some monster wearing my skin. And it's the same thing for Arthas, and it's the same thing for Anduin at the end of this. It's going to be a thing where they have to come to terms, or Arthas, his soul is now wherever it is, or have gone away or into nothingness, whatever the case is. But Anduin's got to deal with that too. Yes, he was dominated. He was forced to do things. But Matt and I have talked about this. He was just a vessel. He was a channel, right? He was still present for everything he did. And now he has to deal with it. And he's going to...
Yeah, the difference, I would argue the difference is between the two is that at no point did the jailer puppet Sylvanas and drive her around.
Right. He gave her choices that he knew she would make.
And the Lich King, Arthas as the Lich King, absolutely wasn't under that kind of control. Because he straight up refused to do what the jailer wanted. He didn't help
Bolvar
him.
as well.
Yeah, both of them.
Bolvar wore that helmet too. Just,
And so it's oddly, Anduin's case is different because Anduin literally had no agency. He was being used as a puppet, whereas Sylvanas had agency because she turned around and shot at him when she realized what he was doing. There's a difference. I don't think you can argue that Sylvanas was dominated. You can absolutely argue that Anduin was. Arthas chose every point where things went bad for him. Like you lied to your men and the mercenaries that fought for you. He did that before he ever touched, Frostmourne. He
scuttled the boats before he ever got that sword.
Yeah, made absolutely sure that he couldn't respond to his father's order. He wanted to stay in Northrend. He wanted to keep hunting, even though he'd been told repeatedly, no, don't do this. So yeah, there's some, you can't ignore the jailer's role, but the jailer was very definitely not controlling Arthas. That would be my take on it. I don't know if Liz has anything she wants to throw in here.
I got nothing. I don't understand what's going on anymore. It seems like just
the one thing I was
random characters with weird motivations that I'm never going to understand. I have a squishy mortal brain, I guess.
Play through this week's campaign. This week's campaign does explain a lot about domination magic.
Oh, yeah.
As we're going through it, and there is a new cinematic that also goes into some things. We're not going to talk about them today because I know I haven't had a chance to go through them yet. I don't know if you guys have either, but
yeah. And also we have a podcast where we do that kind of thing. So.
Exactly.
So, but I think that kind of answers your question here.
Yep. Which means I'm out. Bye. No, Liz, you're up next.
Okay, let's take a look over here, and we have a question from Wellfire. How did the elementals communicate that Thrall forced them to kill Garrosh when it happened on Draenor in an alternate timeline? Why was Thrall affected across timelines? Do you think it is best that some things are left unexplained or unresolved to keep us guessing, or would you rather have everything explained and tied down? I guess I'm actually kind of in the middle here because I like having questions. I like still having mysteries. I like having things to think about. But I also think lately Warcraft has leaned on that very heavily. Like every ending is a cliffhanger to something new and bigger. And I'm kind of tired of that. I like having mysteries, but I do like having things resolved too. When things are resolved, we can move on and do something else, do something new. And the past few expansions, it feels like nothing is ever resolved, and we're already always stuck in this morass of chaos. So I don't think that answers the question at all, but that's where I am. That's what I think.
They kind of answered this actually in Siege of Orgrimmar. So in Siege of Orgrimmar, the culmination of the Dark Shaman, everything you've learned up to this point is that Dark Shaman, when they start forcing the elements and shackling them, they're sort of tainted. There's a mark or something that they carry with them that the elementals can kind of pick up on. So it doesn't matter where it happened, it matters that it happened. And Thrall sort of carries that with him. The difference between Thrall and a Dark Shaman is that Thrall has genuine regret over it, whereas the Dark Shaman would continue to do it and continue to enslave elementals to their will. Which is why now Thrall can do shaman-y things again, because he's sort of paid his penance and told them that he's sorry and gave them all nice little fruit baskets and everything else. But that's sort of why, even though it happened on Draenor, the mark of it, the stain of it, followed him back to Azeroth. And not only that, but his own guilt as well, because that weighs on him as well. Because one of the other things they talk about in shamanism, this is going way back to vanilla WoW, back in the early days when you used to actually have physical totems. In order to use your totems, you had casting focuses. And
they
you
were in
went,
your bags, yeah.
There were 4 of them, one for each of the elements that sat in your bags that you had to go through questing for. And during that questing, they explained to you that your willpower is what you needed in order to maintain your sense of self while dealing with the elements, and particularly the elementals that you would summon forth. It was a contest of wills because, again, the elementals on Azeroth were unruly and they were not super chill like the ones on Draenor to begin with, and you needed to have a strong spine to deal with them, not necessarily force them into doing things, but tell them, look, I'm here for a transaction and we can do this. We can do this, or I can walk away. Let's make it mutually beneficial. So his will had been broken as sort of at that point when he realized what he did. So yeah, that combined with whatever he was carrying with him to know that he had forced elementals to do something that he knows damn well they shouldn't have. Yeah. Or that they didn't want to do. That's the reasons why. And I'll shut up now so Matt can talk.
Oh, I think that you've answered the first part of it pretty effectively. You didn't talk about the second part at all. So I'm going to talk about the second part.
Sure.
I think it's best to have some things that are left unexplained. That's straight up, I think that. I think the biggest problem, oddly enough, I feel like the opposite of Liz, but I think we have the same issue, just that we're looking at it differently. I feel like Warcraft has spent the past 3 expansions trying desperately to explain everything.
Mm-hmm.
And you can argue about whether or not they've successfully done so, but we've gone from the Shadowlands as one example. We've gone from the Shadowlands as a vague death place that we knew existed but knew nothing about to, I have now been to every freaking neighborhood in the Land of Death. I've been to places in the Land of Death that they had lost and had not seen. Been to Korthia. I've now been to the backstage of the Land of Death. It's all explained now. If you go to Legion, we went to Argus. Argus is all explained now. We know about the Argus inside Argus. We know about these zones. We have done Argus. And as a result, like, since the combination of that and the fact that the storyline never resolves, because I definitely agree with that, it's constantly like awful things happen and there is no resolution to them. They do not end. There's no wrap up. There's no point where, I keep coming back to this. The end of Legion, the beginning of Battle for Azeroth, 2 major cities got destroyed. And there has been nothing to wrap that up. There's been no closure. There's been no, what do we do now? Because we haven't had time to do anything now. Mm-hmm. It's, had to run around trying to stop N'Zoth and, defeating, keeping the world from dying. Then we had to go to the Land of Death and keep a big giant flashlight head jerk from killing our planet to do whatever. And there's an example again of me feeling like the difference isn't necessarily that they're not explaining things. It's that they're not necessarily explaining them very well. I still don't know exactly what the jailer was trying to do. I know what he was doing. I know that he was using, things to do things. I'm trying not to spoil here, but I still don't know what he thought he would achieve at the end of it. what was your goal for killing everything, for ending eternity? What was your new world supposed to be? Maybe if you'd stopped for like 5 seconds and explained your plan to us, you might have convinced us you were right. You never even tried, and that's a problem. I don't like going into a final fight with a boss where I don't know what he's doing. It worked for a while with the jailer because it made him seem like he wasn't concerned with us. We weren't an issue to him.
Mm-hmm.
That's galling, and it also makes you a little afraid. You want to know what this guy's up to. But do you? Do you feel like you know what this guy's up to? Like, even after everything, if you honestly feel like, okay, I got a handle on this, then you're doing better than me, because I don't know what he was doing.
We talked about this today.
I definitely don't know what he was doing. Yeah, I've watched all the cinematics. I have no idea. I have no idea what his goal was.
And that's, to me, that is an example of them trying to use, because this entire expansion is about explaining and exploring this new place, but it doesn't feel like it came together at the end. It doesn't feel like I know he was trying to do a bad thing, and that thing would have been very bad for me and the people that I, hang out with all the time. The world of Azeroth, I don't want it killed for his plan, but I still don't know what all we get is a cryptic, a divided cosmos, blah, 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 blah. You get his cryptic line at the end, and okay. Now, of course, there will be quests. There will be more stuff. It's possible that we will find out more. But at some point, you need to put a pin in something and then move on to one of the other things that you don't know what it is and explore that. And that's where I feel like this one is not quite gelling. I feel like Shadowlands had a lot of potential. I feel like it was actually pretty good in a lot of places. But in the end, I have not felt like I really grasped the stakes at any point. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think they're doing that now. And we were talking about this in Guild today, actually, about Firm's research, kind of indicating a little bit more about what's going on and what is at stake. At least,
and that's true. And we haven't really had time to unwrap all of that yet.
Yeah,
and that's cool. But I do think that there is a certain amount of that is. I definitely feel like it's good to explain things, and I also feel like it's good to have things that don't get explained.
I agree.
So I think Liz and I are coming at this from the same perspective, but seeing it slightly differently, or perhaps different perspectives seeing it the same. I'm not sure. But anyway, that's my answer to that question.
Okay. I think we're ready for the next one then.
Yep.
Fantastic. All right. This one comes from Easy Target. Now with pre-owned car, maybe Unity. Okay, question. Hello, watchers. I've been thinking about the lore and game system of World of Warcraft, mostly the game systems. Lore resets are the bitter pill we occasionally swallow, but in all honesty are the surface, like a fresh mural on the side of a condemned building next to the abandoned factory. Wow, okay, so that's some evocative imagery there. Sorry, Outlands. The engine under the hood has been replaced from a 2004 model to a 2021 Corona XM, lighter, faster, but still hauling the Warcraft 3 body. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit there. Okay, so it's basically everything is running off of a Frankenstein code. When or will a full WoW 2 ever be made?
Never.
Yeah, never. I don't see it ever being made anytime soon. Like, what, people are still here to play WoW. People are still playing WoW Classic. Like, there are people who are upset that they did Cataclysm, which still left WoW mostly intact. You think they're going to want a complete reboot and WoW 2? Especially now that like Microsoft purchased Actiblizzard, and they're probably going to do what they did with the other game studios and just be like, hey, keep making this. It's making money. Just do your thing. There's no incentive. And the only thing that could kill WoW is if they try to make another WoW. And Matt brought this up before, but I'll bring it up now. EverQuest. Let's talk about that. EverQuest Run is still running. EverQuest 2, it was out there, not even remotely close to popular as far as compared to EverQuest 1.
EverQuest 2 definitely divided the player base. Both of these games are still running, but EverQuest 1 is orders of magnitude more players.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is.
So why would WoW do that at that point? There's no incentive for them to create a WoW 2. There's no Blizzard would create it for what purpose? I mean, if you're talking about a whole fresh code base, they could do what they did with Cataclysm. Sorry.
Yeah, they did. I think that something that I remember Liz pointing this out to me once. Essentially, with WoW Classic and now the potential of we've got Burning Crusade Classic and we're pretty sure we're going to get Wrath Classic. We're now in a position where we do have WoW 2. We're playing it.
Yeah.
Like I remember you said something along those lines. I may be misremembering. Do you have anything you want to say on that one?
Yeah, I mean, some of what this question seems to be coming at is that we're playing on this Frankenstein's code mess that has been, 17 years in the making, and we have all of this. I mean, I haven't seen the WoW code, but I assume maybe after 17 years, it's a little messy. I mean, it's hard to keep maintaining something for that long.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to the car metaphor, they probably have replaced all the parts in the car. This could be a Ship of Theseus kind of situation where everything is different.
Yeah, it is kind of hard.
Because
like they've changed the file formatting.
Mm-hmm.
They've switched to like a different, code prefix. They've used different so it is hard to know how much of original World of Warcraft is even left in World of Warcraft. At what point have you got a new ship? That is an interesting point.
I know there are some people who know the answer to this question that listen to our podcast. I'm really curious about this. I promise I will keep my mouth shut, but please message me and let me know how much of the original code is still in play.
I mean, I don't think they have to make a sequel to, keep they can always update the code base. They can always fix the bugs, even though it's always more of a headache to fix existing code, I think, than to make all new code. But there are so many people playing this. I don't think there's any reason to go back and start over from scratch because, like you all both pointed out, you're just going to split the player base. And we're already here. We're right here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that they made it so you can play WoW Classic with a WoW subscription.
Mm-hmm.
So that way you don't have any reason to subscribe to a different game. You don't have to change the payment process. All of the money still goes into the WoW folder. Like if they were going to do a WoW 2, like an actual sequel to World of Warcraft, then now they have to make a decision. Are we going to make a different pay structure? Is it going to be more like a live service game? Is it going to be more like, a lot of MMOs nowadays don't use subscriptions.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is not the normal for MMOs. So would they now have to go to a more modern structure? Because the WoW player base has been conditioned to accept subs. We've had them for years. But if you put out WoW 2, do you now then have to modernize that? There's a lot of reasons why I don't think it's...
And the other interesting thing with WoW Classic, like if we wanted to do like a sequel to WoW's story or something like that, you could just make another kind of WoW Classic thing that's sort of like a spin-off, but it runs on the same game client. It's on the same game subscription, and you just press a button in the client and you go into this different world. Like, I wonder if Cataclysm were released today, if we were having our Cataclysm moment today, would we have just a straight launch of Cataclysm rewriting the world? Or would we say, okay, we're going to make some new servers, and these are Cataclysm servers, and you press a button in Battle.net, and you can log on to all of this exciting new stuff?
Here's another side of that too, real quick. I mean, I don't want to go too far into it, but like, think of the back end for it too, right? So WoW, when it first released, hit a level of popularity that nobody expected. And if you played back when it was first available, there were days where like servers would go down, you'd have login queues, it would be impossible to play for days at a time. It's so much so that they were constantly working around the clock to stand up new servers to accommodate the volume that they had not anticipated. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out, like, they also didn't expect the game to last longer than a year, 2 years at tops, before people moved on to something else, because that's kind of what happened with MMOs at the time. So they built this massive support structure and this infrastructure around the current game. Now, how do you do that if you try to make a sequel or another game? Do you build it at the same current scale, thinking everybody's going to jump ship? Do you do it at half the scale and hope you don't run into any problems? And we as players are a lot more sensitive to downtime than we used to be. Like, it used to be one of those things like, okay, I can't log into WoW today, I'll just go move on with my life. Not that we weren't upset, but Now think about it. When server maintenances run long, I've seen Reddit. I've seen what people comment. I've seen Twitter comments on that.
I've seen Fire and I've seen Reddit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But people are sensitive to that. So do you gamble on under purchasing? And then that's a huge undertaking in and of itself. Where do you stand those data centers up? Like it's a big thing.
I do have to point out that I said that Diablo 2 Resurrected had a rough launch. The only thing it had rough in its launch was downtime.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. It's otherwise it was the exact same game. It didn't have any major bugs that rendered it unplayable aside from that one thing. And that was enough.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
people remember that.
Yeah, it is interesting to think about. I mean, remember the error 137 for Diablo 3? That was also a big deal. Like that game would not stay up for the first day. That game was like falling all over itself. Like it was actually like a drunken Red Dead Redemption. It couldn't get up the stairs. It was just constantly crashing to the floor. So yeah, stuff does happen. So, but we got time for one more question, I think.
Yeah, we should. And that's gonna be Liz because that was the last one.
Yeah, Liz, you get to pick. You get to pick which one you want to ask.
Well, I'll just go with the next one. Hey, watchers, to combat the boredom some players seem to be experiencing from basic gameplay, as is being seen from reluctance to engage in open world content, some tweak or addition to basic combat mechanics is needed. What I mean is, with basic are moving, casting, and melee, have you thought about what could be modified to enrich gameplay while keeping the traditions of tab targeting intact? The thought I got for this is as follows. Remove range indicator from ability. Let spells activate and vanish if fired towards targets outside its range. Give abilities more diverse ranges so classes overall have different ranges, and add a range stat to caster gear to increased cast range. Give melee weapons different reaches. Finally, add dodge and roll to all classes. Best wishes, Ashanshi from Alonsis EU. I think this is interesting stuff, but it sounds a lot more like an action game.
It sounds like Kingdoms of Amalur, really.
It sounds like
it's
WildStar.
Much more of an action game. I do think a lot of the classes have become homogenized. They play very similarly, even when they're different in their ways, but they are kind of static, and there's been a push to, kind of equalize all classes, which is good in some ways and kind of boring in other ways. I don't know what the right way to fix that would be. I like having diversity, but the problem is, how do you make diversity and make things really different and interesting and exciting, but still keep classes kind of balanced? That's rough. That's hard.
Look at what happened when they put in Demon Hunter tanks. Mm-hmm. And Demon Hunter tanks have a very distinct, very different play style, and they completely dominated Mythic plus Dungeons.
We can go earlier than that. Yeah. Look what happened when they added Death Knights.
Yeah, but Death Knights, when they first added Death Knights could do anything in any spec. So that class had an added complication besides the difference of, how they do a specific thing. They did everything different. Mm-hmm. Like they tanked and DPS'd in all three specs. So that got standardized down too. That's definitely something worth thinking about in terms of how you make a class distinct. Because that class was not just making other classes look, slow compared to them, but it's like you had different. I remember tanking as ice frost. I was a frost tank in Wrath of the Lich King, and they really wanted me for some fights. Anything with a lot of adds, you wanted a frost tank. Anything with a lot of damage, you wanted a blood tank. And I don't remember if anybody wanted unholy tanks. I don't think
AoE
did.
AoE tanking. That was unholy because it could just snap aggro on everything.
Yeah, I just remembered getting frost. I ended up doing a lot of snap aggro as well. So, but regardless, that is interesting to think about the concept of diversity versus making every class viable for the roles that they play. Looking at this list of stuff, I'm of two minds about it. One is that I feel like it would make ranged even more the popular DPS group. Do you know what I mean? Ranged already has the advantage of being able to stand out of a lot of the stuff that the melee can't avoid. And I remember just even talking about WoW Classic recently when they were talking about doing, heroic, not heroic. They were doing Nefarian in Season of Mastery, and guilds were like, I don't know how you're going to bring up melee to this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's almost always the go-to when a complicated fight mechanic is, cut melee, bring less melee. I don't want to see that happen more. So maybe the thing where weapons have ranges would be nice because then you could stand further back. Like I mean, if you got a polearm, I guess.
But yeah, something like in D&D,
5 and
things
10
like
feet
polearms
reach,
have reach. It has so you can have a particular weapon and hit from a little farther back.
I mean, feral druids can already do that, right? Like feral druids they have a 10-yard melee range, 8-yard melee range, something like that.
I think it's 8.
Yeah,
feral or guardian.
Feral.
Feral. Okay. I think all druid specs can get it because I think it's by picking up balance, which increases the range of your abilities.
Oh, you are correct. But there are a lot of.
It seems real common. It seems real common with feral.
There are a lot of really good ideas here, and I want to make sure that I throw that out there before I say anything else. The caveat that I'm going to say is that I think these are really good ideas that don't fit WoW. And I think it's just the nature of the game. MMO action games tend to be very specific and deliberate in their group sizes. Lost Ark, the group size is nowhere near, 20 plus for a raid or whatever it is. I think it's actually
to go along with that. Diablo Immortal, which is definitely an action MMO. The biggest raid is 8 players.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In that these type of ideas work better in a smaller group like that because you can give more attention to a fewer number of classes. The other problem is, I'm going to throw the number 36 out there. There are currently 36 specs in the game. You have to figure out something to make all 36 specs work while also adding those in. Back in the original days of classic or vanilla, whatever you want to call it, we had things like to hit. We had things like parry. We had things like there were so many stats.
Defense stat,
yeah,
expertise.
Oh God, expertise, yeah. Like we had all these stats that did these things, and the reason they got taken out is as you keep adding more classes, and as you try to keep getting like accessibility to so many specs, it becomes too much. And hell, we had this conversation when they added versatility to the game. I think we spent weeks and weeks talking about will it unbalance things? How are they going to balance things? How is it going to work with the other stats and things like that? And it's delicate.
One thing to keep in mind too, since you made the versatility mention, there's 2 things. One is the reforging discussion that we had, I think last week.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh
whereas like Liz made the point that it turned the game into like a math problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's about balancing all these stats. The other thing is versatility was intended for PvP. It was intended to be on PvP gear as a way to increase the survivability of people PvPing. It wasn't intended to be used for the reason, for anything else. That's not, this happens with new systems and new mechanics. If you put in a number, you put in a stat like versatility, you're intending it for one thing, but what versatility did was reduce crits.
Mm-hmm.
Tanks love reducing crits that they take. And healers of tanks love when their tanks don't get crit a lot because they can then predict more smooth damage curves and control how much mana they're using to heal them. And so versatility gear became tank gear.
Mm-hmm.
Tanks who couldn't get enough defense to push stuff off the table were putting versatility on. Shaman, who were not at this point intended to tank, were putting male versatility gear on and tanking. And they could do it. Because they had originally been intended to tank before paladins and shaman were introduced to both factions. So suddenly you had shamans tanking in, I want to say, up to Gruul's Lair.
I 100% tanked Gruul.
Yeah. And then they went back and changed versatility and changed shaman, so they couldn't do it anymore. They got rid of Rockbiter's threat, I think.
They did. They had to. Yeah.
Yeah. Rockbiter's threat was so good that shaman tanks were actually, on certain fights, shaman tanks were the desired tank.
There was a point where like prot tanks couldn't pull aggro off of you if you had a Rockbiter up.
Yep. So, and again, that was an unexpected
consequence.
Yeah. And so you have to think about that when you put this stuff in. I don't hate any of these ideas. I think at this point I said it sounds like Kingdoms of Amalur. I love Kingdoms of Amalur. I played the heck out of the game.
Sounds like Elden Ring.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I mean, WoW's complexity isn't even just the 36 classes. It's also 36 specs. It's also the fact that of the 12 classes, some of them only have one role. Some of them have 2 roles.
Yeah.
Some of them have 3 roles.
Some of them have 4.
One of them has 4. And we could sit here and argue about whether or not WoW should have roles. Should they have tanks? Should they have healers? Should they have DPS? I don't feel like there's enough time for that. But it is something to consider. The more your game has defined specific roles, the more predictable it needs to be to fill them. Healers need to be able to rely on the tank being tanky. I remember when we used to do dungeons on stream. We haven't done a dungeon in stream in a long time, and I kind of miss it. But one of the things that we noticed when we were doing the opening Shadowlands dungeons was every tank but the Death Knight was blowing up because it was early. They hadn't done the balance patch yet, and Death Knights just happened to have the most predictable damage income. Like when I tanked on the Death Knight, Liz could heal me and practically go to sleep compared to on the Warrior, who just did not have the predictability. The Warrior might take no damage or might take a ton of damage. The Death Knight was just taking the same amount of damage all the time. Predictability is like such a benefit to a healer because they have to heal everybody, not just the tank.
Except you, Doe. I won't heal you again after last night.
But so there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of complexity here. I do think that at some point they're going to add in something like a dodge roll. Looking at the way gaming is going, I think that will probably come sooner.
They might, yeah. So
I mean, I kind of like the idea of ranges and kind of, you'd get kind of, it would really change up how you do group content because it would spread players out in like different unique ways. And it would make like the effects that always hit melee right now. Maybe, they go out to like 10 feet or 15 feet and they hit different groups that, that could add some interesting diversity. But also my holy paladin has some heals that are 40 yards and some heals that are 30 yards. And that makes me crazy.
Yeah.
So
the other thing that I might see happen with that is you might see particular classes become more popular because of their built-in ranges, right? Like if you can stand an extra 10 yards away and not have to deal with a mechanic, that might be more beneficial or more desirable. There's a potential for that.
But if you had, an increased diversity of ranges, maybe Blizzard would start thinking about that a little more when it comes to, where's this damage going to fall? Because I think this would be less of a problem if Blizzard didn't, just do tons and tons of melee damage and lots of AoE effects that are around the boss. Like, if we had encounters that spread that around a little more, and if we had reasons for players to think about spreading around at different ranges, you could add an interesting dynamic that way. But right now, bosses aren't quite designed that way, and so I don't know.
It's always interesting to me that even like a huge boss, like an enormous boss who takes up half the room, I still have to practically wedge myself up his butt. And that shouldn't,
They've gotten better about that a little bit.
They've gotten better about it, but it's still there.
And different bosses can be very different. Like with Sylvanas, I felt like you had to be really, really, really close to her to hit her.
Yeah,
and that was a problem because of AoE effects.
Yeah.
But some bosses you can stay a fair distance back. So I don't know.
I honestly feel like maybe this isn't something you need for ranged DPS, but it might be something that would be good for melee. Like if you added in, okay, I can talent out and my range gets like, maybe instead of having to be super close, I could be further away. Or if I switch to a different weapon, like a polearm, now I can attack from further away. There might be some room to play around with that. Like for instance, Death Knights, a lot of Death Knight abilities, like Death Knights have to be in melee to hit with their weapons, but like, Icy Touch or whatever has a range. There's damaging abilities that they can do that have a range. They're spells. So maybe look into that too. I don't know, but I feel like we've answered this question, even if we haven't completely answered it.
I think so. But I also think we're over on time, so you want me to do my... Okay.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, do your thing.
All right, well, folks, Blizzard Watch is made possible due to the generous contributions at patreon.com/BlizzardWatch. Your continued support means this podcast site and community is able to thrive and grow. Blizzard Watch supporters enjoy exclusive benefits like early access to the podcast, a better chance at having your question answered on our podcast or the queue, and an ads-free site experience.
Thank you, Joe. This, as we were talking, this is the end of the show. This has been the Blizzard Watch podcast. If you've got a question for the podcast, please send it to podcast@blizzardwatch.com with the subject line podcast or Blizzard Watch, so we know it's for this show. Or again, you can hit our Discord. We've got both the patron Q&A podcast questions channel and the Q&A podcast questions channel. You can ask questions in both of those, depending on if you're a patron or not. I wanted to close out with the typical thing where we tell you guys that we support not just Activision Blizzard employees, but pretty much all video game employees trying to create a better workplace for themselves and a better industry for the employees. That stuff from last year is not over. We may be talking about it less because it's been months at this point, but it is definitely not over, and that is something to keep. Well, thank you guys for being here with us. Thank you to Liz and Joe, as always, for being excellent co-hosts. This has been the Blizzard Watch Podcast. We will see you next week.
Pumpkins.